Hello, my name is Chris Simon, and it is going to be tough for me to keep to a 5 minute introductory video with all the other things I need to cover. So I'm going to dive right in. This is the school level governance, fiscal responsibilities of school principals, as well as my introductory video. So, first, a little bit about myself. My name, like I said, is Chris Simon. I am married and I have two kids that are 8 and 6 years old. We currently live in Tonganoxie, Kansas, which is the town that I also teach in. It's the town my wife grew up in. And we're in the middle of summer, so right now we really enjoy swimming and watching. Just finished up with a whole month of baseball, nonstop baseball, so I'm kind of ready for the summer to begin. And we love golfing, riding bikes, fishing, playing with our kids, going on vacations. We actually will be taking our big Florida vacation at the end of this week, which is why I'm trying to get things done as early in the week. Professionally, I'm about to start my 16th year of teaching. 12 of those years have been in fifth grade, but I've also taught some fourth and sixth grade. I've worked in Manhattan, Kansas, the Circle School District in Wichita, Lawrence, and currently I'm in the Tonganoxie School District. So as I went through the articles, I'm going to talk about several of the recurring themes, one of which was school level governance. So a lot of the articles talked about how putting the budgeting decisions at the school level is advantageous. Several of the articles talked about, or one of the articles talked about decentralized budgets, which allow the principal more increased responsibility over their budgets. And one of the advantages of that would be to hire more teachers, which would benefit the students. Site-based budgeting was another type of budgeting that was discussed, where they use data given from the centralized group and then turns the power over to the individualized school or the individual schools. And the whole purpose of school level governance would turn the power to the school and then give the building administrator and the teachers the ability to control the budgets based on the needs that they know they have within their own school or their community. Currently, with our principal, we're pretty locked in with our school board decisions. There's very little autonomy for the principal, and we have very centralized budgeting here. We actually have a new staff turnover with an administrator this year. There were a few issues that I think will probably come out in this intro video about some of my views about how things are going in my district or some frustrations that I have. I'll try to keep it as positive as I can, but sometimes that might bleed through. Second theme was student and adult success and well-being. It talked about how equitable financial inputs for even lower income schools compared to the affluent schools can improve student performance. Increasing funding for schools can increase staff and lower the class size. Whoops, I need to change that. Whoops, go back. And also increase the teacher salary, which doesn't sound like it would in itself improve student performance, but if you have lower teacher turnover, increased staff satisfaction, you're going to get better results. It also increases the equity for students in all of the areas. For our building or our principal, there's been a recent decrease in staffing, mostly due to staff dissatisfaction. Some of it is to do with pay. Some of it is to do with class size and being overworked. We've lost a lot of our special education department due to understaffing, which is a budgeting issue. It's also very difficult for us to allocate funds for competitive substitute pay in our area. So we really, really struggled with having to absorb other classrooms because when a teacher's absent, because we weren't able to get substitutes in the building. Another theme was data-informed decisions. The advantage of this is to use data to inform where best to spend school funding. It also gives school the opportunity to pivot quickly away from a curriculum or resource that isn't working and increase funding for an area that is working. Um, for our school or our principal, there has been increased board pressure to stress the importance of our map data to determine student success. I don't personally agree with how all that was being used. I do think that there was some miscommunication happening between the board and the administration as far as how our data is accurately reflecting what our students are doing and what the true root of certain data points are. Another theme was equitable resource plans, which would be the use of student-based budgeting, which was where you give leaders control over dollars rather than just staff or materials. They get a set amount of money rather than here's the amount of staff that you receive. So that's an equitable resource plan that has been successful in some schools. Most school funding comes from the state and local government, and the purpose of that is to give a dollar amount per students for what is considered a quality student education. Obviously, that definition of quality education can differ from state to state, but in an individual state, it is their job to determine how much money per student can get them that quality education. Our community is a growing community, so we do have some increased funding per student for our building because our building has increased year after year in the number of students that we receive. But there has been an inequitable distribution or access to different fundraising opportunities from school to school. There have been some different organizations that have provided money to the middle school or the high school or even the elementary schools, but it has been for sporting equipment or certain sporting equipment rather than all sports. And so there have been issues in our district with equitable distribution of those funds. As far as the common theme of finance laws, policies, and regulations, the policies are put in place to ensure that every student is receiving a piece of the pie. Often funding is broken down on a per student basis so that each student can be assured that they're receiving an equal amount of money to the student next to them. Federal, state, and local governments each provide some funding to fund public education. Schools do have the right to refuse some federal funding depending on what is being asked of that school. Our school does receive a significant amount of technology federal funding, which necessitates a lot of technology education in our classroom. We have to provide a lot of digital citizenship curriculum. We have to provide a lot of access to technology for students across the board, and we have to include a lot of programs on the computers in order for them to be considered federally funded. Another theme that I determined was that different communities have different needs. And it talked a lot in the articles about how affluent schools have a lot of different staffing and financial advantages over schools in lower income areas. States determine the funding for public education very differently. So, depending on what state you live in, you could have vast differences in the amount of funding that is provided to you. Also, there are several states that have a lot of funding that's provided to them from programs that no longer exist or are drying up in their states. So the funding is really struggling in those states. Large districts with many different schools have different challenges than those where they only have one school in each. Our school has only one elementary school, one middle school, and one high school. So it is a little easier for our schools to determine the needs of our community, and therefore our school a lot easier. These were my references. And these were my thoughts on my concluding thoughts for my correlation, my relevancy, and my reflection, which I'll go over the reflection because that's the one where I felt the most passionately about. But I felt like when I become an administrator in the future, one of the things I'll struggle with the most is setting my own priorities and trying to match that with that of my school or community. And the hard part of that will be inevitably whenever you set a priority list that it will not match other people's. So that expression where you can't please everyone will inevitably come to fruition when I do become a building administrator. Anyway, it was nice to, or I look forward to meeting everyone and working with everyone. Thanks for listening.